The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over Wilkeswood Park. The fading light painted the sky in shades of violet and amber, a surreal backdrop to the neatly trimmed hedgerows and winding gravel paths. David Walker strolled lazily through the park, Max III, a boisterous golden retriever, tugging at his leash. It was their nightly ritual, a brief escape from the mundane routine of David's work as a local history teacher. Max bounded ahead, sniffing eagerly at every lamppost and tuft of grass. David let the dog lead the way, his mind lost in a tangle of lesson plans and a half-baked idea for a podcast about unsolved mysteries. That's when he noticed them. A small group of women stood under an ancient oak tree in the park's center. Their beauty was striking, eerie, almost unreal. They were tall, with slender frames that moved gracefully even in stillness. Their eyes, large and luminescent, seemed to shimmer like liquid mercury, and their hair cascaded like rivulets of starlight, catching every ounce of the fading sun. David blinked. Cosplayers, he muttered under his breath, tugging Max's leash to keep the dog from bounding over to the group. The women wore long, flowing robes that glowed faintly in hues of silver and violet. Their presence exuded an otherworldly serenity that set them apart from the joggers and stroller-pushing parents scattered throughout the park. Curiosity prickled at the back of David's mind. They didn't look like your average Comic-Con attendees. Their mannerisms were far too composed, their laughter soft and musical, as though the very air around them carried their voices like delicate glass chimes. David crouched behind a shrub, feeling equal parts ridiculous and intrigued. He peered through the foliage as one of the women raised her arm, holding what looked like a crystal sphere. The object glowed softly in her hand, casting a gentle light over the group. Max let out a soft bark. "Shh," David whispered, tugging on the leash, but it was too late. The women turned as one, their gaze piercing and synchronized. For a moment, David froze, heart pounding. Then, to his astonishment, they returned to their conversation, ignoring him entirely. It was then that the shimmering began. Directly beneath the oak tree, the air seemed to ripple, like heat waves on a summer road. The space between the women and the ground flickered, then solidified into a gleaming oval portal, its edges rimmed with pulsing white light. David's jaw dropped as one by one the women stepped in through the portal, vanishing into the light. In seconds, they were gone, leaving no trace of their presence except for a faint, pleasant hum in the air. "What the hell?" David murmured, standing up. He approached the spot cautiously, his heart hammering in his chest. Max bounded ahead, sniffing furiously at the ground. There was nothing, just grass, leaves, and an oddly shaped rock. The dog barked again, pawing at the rock. "Max, leave it," David said, but his voice wavered. Something about the stone drew his gaze. It was smooth and jet black, with faint grooves carved into its surface, forming patterns that seemed to shift and flow as he stared. Before David could think better of it, he reached out and touched the rock. The world around him dissolved in an instant. David stumbled forward as the portal closed behind him with a soft whoomp. He blinked, disoriented, and took a fearful step back, but the shimmering oval of light was gone. The air smelled of something sharp and clean, like ozone after a thunderstorm. The ground beneath his feet was soft and springy, covered in a grass-like substance that shimmered faintly with its own light. Above him, the sky stretched in impossible colors. Lavender clouds floated in an aquamarine sky that seemed to pulse and shift like a living canvas. And then he noticed them. The women stood in a loose circle, their backs turned to him. They were speaking in a language that sounded like music woven with wind chimes, their voices lilting and harmonious. Hi?" David croaked. The women turned, their faces a mixture of surprise and curiosity. One of them stepped forward. Her robe shimmered more brightly than the others, and her silver hair was braided into intricate patterns. Her eyes, impossibly large and luminous, locked onto his. "You are not supposed to be here," she said. Her voice was calm, but there was an undercurrent of authority that made David's stomach tighten. Yeah, I figured," David stammered. "Look, I didn't mean to. I just touched the rock, and you touched the Alaran keystone? Another woman exclaimed, her voice tinged with incredulity. Uh, I guess? Is that the rock? There was a collective murmur among the women. The leader raised a hand, silencing them. You are human, she said, as though confirming something obvious yet deeply perplexing. David nodded. You have breached the celestial conclave. The what now? This gathering is private. Her tone was clipped, though not unkind. David glanced around nervously. Look, I don't know what's going on, but I swear I'm not a threat or anything. I was just walking my dog and, oh no, Max, I left him behind. The leader raised an eyebrow, or at least David thought she did. Her expression was subtle, but somehow conveyed everything. Max? My dog, David explained. He's still in the park. Your companion is safe, another woman said. The keystone does not harm those who remain behind. Well, that's a relief, David muttered. He glanced around, trying to make sense of his surroundings. So, where am I exactly? The leader hesitated. You are in the Nexus, a convergence point between worlds. Right, of course, David said, his voice dripping with disbelief. And you're all aliens? There was a pause before she replied. In your terms, yes. David blinked, trying to process the situation. So what are you doing here? I mean, on Earth? The women exchanged glances, their expressions unreadable. Finally, the leader spoke. We gather here to discuss matters of importance. The Earth is neutral ground. Matters of importance, David repeated. Like what? Galactic politics? Space trade agreements? The leader's lips twitched, almost forming a smile. Not quite. Our concerns are cultural. Cultural? Another woman stepped forward, her voice soft and melodic. We exchange knowledge, art, music, stories. Each of us represents a different world, a different civilization. David frowned. So you're like an intergalactic book club? This time the leader's smile was unmistakable. In essence, yes. David stared at them, his mind racing. And no one on Earth knows about this? Your species is unprepared for such knowledge, the leader said. The truth would disrupt your development. David nodded slowly. Yeah, that tracks. People can't even handle pineapple on pizza. The women exchanged puzzled glances. It's a thing, David said quickly. Never mind. As the initial tension eased, David couldn't help but feel awed by the women. Their movements were fluid and elegant, their presence almost hypnotic. Each seemed to radiate a unique aura, subtle colors that shifted and danced like the northern lights. Can I ask something? David ventured. The leader inclined her head. Why here? Why Earth? The leader's gaze softened. Earth occupies a unique position in the galaxy. It is young, vibrant, full of potential. Though your species is limited, there is beauty in your simplicity. Gee, thanks, David said wryly. It was meant as a compliment, another woman said with a faint smile. Sure. Okay, David replied. But seriously, what happens now? Do I just go back and pretend this never happened? The leader's expression grew serious. You cannot remain here. The Nexus is not meant for humans. Prolonged exposure could be detrimental. David's stomach sank. So you're sending me back? Yes, she said. But first, she glanced at the others, who nodded, to confirm what they were all thinking. The leader stepped forward and placed a hand on David's forehead. Her touch was cool and comforting, and a wave of warmth spread through his body. Images flooded his mind, glimpses of alien worlds, towering crystalline cities, oceans that shimmered like molten gold, skies filled with twin suns and moons. He saw civilizations far older and more advanced than anything he could imagine. Their cultures rich with art, music, and knowledge that stretched back millennia. When she withdrew her hand, David staggered, his breath ragged. What was that? A gift, the leader said. A fragment of what we share. It is all we can offer. David stared at her, his mind reeling. I don't even know your name. You may call me Alira, she said. Alira. David repeated. Thank you, I think. She extended her hand, holding the keystone. Touch it, and you will return to your world. David hesitated. Will I ever see you again? Alira's gaze was unreadable. Perhaps, but for now, this must remain our secret. With a deep breath, David placed his hand on the keystone. The world dissolved around him once more. David stumbled back into Wilkeswood Park, the familiar scent of earth and grass grounding him. Max barked excitedly, wagging his tail as he bounded over. David knelt, ruffling the dog's fur. You won't believe what just happened, buddy. It was amazing, beautiful alien girls everywhere. The dog tilted its head to the side and let a moan, as if to say, not true. I am telling the truth, Max. Pity I could not bring one home. He glanced back at the oak tree. The portal was gone and the park was as ordinary as ever. But as David walked home, his mind buzzing with the images Alira had shown him, he couldn't shake the feeling that the world had changed. Or maybe he had, as all hope faded, a quiet whisper drifted across the air and caught David's ear ever so slightly. Are you going to leave me just standing here? David quickly turned around. Where did you come from? Do you want to come home with me and Max? David, holding his breath, waiting for her to respond. Yes, and maybe you can show me this famous pineapple pizza. And somewhere under the alien skies of the Nexus, the Celestial Conclave continued their secret meetings, one member short, their conversations echoing across the stars.